Hey, welcome to Ride or Raise this week. Our study for the week is called The Lord Made It Succeed, and we're looking at Genesis chapter 39. So we're looking at the whole chapter for this week. Now in chapter 38, the one that came before this, we read the story of Judah and Tamar, and in the story we learned about how God used the sinfulness of all those people in the story to bring about new life, right? Though God put to death and Onan, he brought life from Tamar with the birth of Perez and Zerah. They became important because, Jacob says to Judah that from him would come the kings that God had promised to him. Remember that God promised Jacob that there would be kings that would come from his offspring. And so Jacob says, well, Judah, you're the one through whom the kings will come. And so he makes that blessing. It's a prophetic blessing. It's going to come true. We know that as we study through Scripture. And so that's what we see here is Judah's offspring, the one through whom this blessing will come. So, Judah's line had to continue because God had spoken. And that's just how it is. So we've seen over and over again that God is a covenant-making God. He makes the promises, and it has to come true. He made a promise to Adam and Eve that one of Eve's children would be the one that would crush the head of the serpent. So God, through subsequent covenants, develops this idea of the chosen one, the anointed one, that would reverse the curse that Adam and Eve had brought upon this universe. And so we see this through the covenants that God makes with these people, that he is showing us what the covenant is all about, what's going to happen. Who is this one that is going to crush the head of the serpent? So we see that over time throughout the Scripture. We've also seen over and over again that people have both intentionally and unintentionally put the covenant into jeopardy. They've placed it in a situation that it could be broken. Like if it goes one way, if it goes the way that they're heading, the covenant won't happen. Some of those people were well-intentioned, but used sinful means to try to bring about. Some were just flat out sinning, and were only thinking of themselves, and would have caused the end of the line of promise. Now, Joseph and his two sons would not be the line through which the Messiah would come, but it would be through Joseph that God would bring safely Jacob and his offspring into Egypt. That's what the importance of Joseph in the story is. And it would begin that time of sojourning that God promised to Abraham. God had given two dreams to Joseph to confirm that he would be ruler, that his family would bow down to him. And instead of waiting to see how God would bring about, Joseph's brothers attempted to stop the dreams. And ultimately, they're trying to stop God from making Joseph the one to whom they bow down to. First, the brothers plotted murder. Then they decided to leave him for dead. And then finally, they sold Joseph to some Ishmaelite traders. They thought that they had accomplished their goal, right? They thought that they ended the dreams, that there's no way for a boy who's a slave in Egypt could be the one to whom they bow down to. But ultimately, this was God's plan to bring all this about. And what he had covenanted with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was going to happen. And what he covenanted with Joseph, too. Those dreams are an extension of that promise that this is going to happen. So no one and no sin could stop this from happening. And so we look at the chapter today, we find this familiar theme. God has his chosen people upon whom he puts his grace and blessing on. And that often strikes jealousy and hatred amongst other people. But God will use their jealousy, and he'll use their hatred and their shame, and he will actually shame them by using their hatred and anger towards him to greater bless his people. That's what he does. As we read in Psalm 2 before, people rage, the nations rage, but he mocks them. He holds them in derision. Now, verses 1 through the first part of 6, we read of Joseph, of how Joseph went from a slave to a master. Right? He's going to go from slave to kind of master of the house. In the second half of verse 6, in verses 6 through 12, we find Joseph overcoming a temptation. That temptation comes in the form of Potiphar's wife. Because of Joseph's faithfulness to God and to Potiphar, he is falsely accused in verses 13 through 18. And then at the end of the story, at the end of the chapter here, we find that God's favor comes to Joseph. And he finds God's favor under this persecution. And so that's where we're going this week. So come back tomorrow and we'll begin our study looking at verses 1 through the beginning of verse 6.